Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take your pile of intriguing sources, could be articles, research, maybe even your own notes, and we distill the really potent insights. Our goal is always to cut through the noise, get right to the good stuff, and give you that shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're embarking on, well, a really fascinating journey, I think, right into the core of our being, the mind. We've got this rich collection of perspectives. They span centuries, different cultures, all grappling with a pretty similar, timeless question, really. How do we navigate the complexities of our inner world? How do we find clarity, maybe cultivate a deeper sense of self?
Indeed. And, in a world just brimming with information, constant external demands, endless distractions, it's easy for the internal landscape, our minds, to feel like unmapped territory, maybe even turbulent territory. Our sources today, they don't offer just one single map. It's more like a variety of compasses, you could say, guiding us through different traditions, different disciplines. We'll be exploring how wisdom from, ancient philosophical texts right up to contemporary insights provides these really potent tools for understanding, for stilling, and ultimately transforming our mental experience, transforming it into something more aligned with, well, peace and purpose.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our mission today is to really extract those vital nuggets of wisdom, the ones that illuminate how we can better understand and work with our minds. We're seeking not just like temporary relief, but lasting peace and maybe a profound sense of purpose. We're talking about practical, philosophical, and spiritual insights all kind of woven together here.
The inner landscape, understanding the ego and the voice in the head.
Right. Let's start with something I think many of us can immediately relate to. That incessant voice in the head, the one it's constantly chattering away, judging, maybe advising, sometimes complaining, or even catastrophizing. What exactly is this voice? And how does it fundamentally shape our day-to-day experience of the world and ourselves?
Eckhart Tolle, in his book A New Earth, gives a remarkably clear articulation of this. And it's really foundational for our deep dive today. He describes this voice in the head simply as the voice of the ego. And crucially, he clarifies that this ego is no more than a conditioned mind pattern, a thought. Just a thought pattern. What's really fascinating, and I think liberating about his perspective, is this point. Ego implies unawareness. Awareness and ego cannot coexist.
Awareness and ego can't coexist. Say more about that.
Well, think about it. The very moment you notice that voice, the actual act of observing it, that creates a crucial shift. You suddenly realize you are not the voice, but the one who is aware of it. Yeah. He says, in fact, you are the awareness that is aware of the voice. And this recognition, Tolle explains, it's the beginning of freeing yourself from what he calls the unobserved mind. It lets you step back from that constant inner narrative to sort of disidentify with it.
That is a powerful distinction. Yeah, it's not about trying to forcefully silence the voice, which, let's be honest, often feels impossible anyway. It's more about changing our fundamental relationship to it, becoming the observer rather than being completely swept away by its commentary. And what's particularly striking is how adaptable this ego sounds, always finding new ways to assert itself, right? Even in unexpected places.
Absolutely. Tolle really highlights this uncanny adaptability. He states that if you take away one kind of identification, say material possessions, the ego will quickly find another. It's not really particular about what it identifies with, as long as it has an identity. He gives this compelling example. It's almost humorous in a way. Someone might renounce all their stuff, embrace minimalism, only for their ego to then latch on to being superior or maybe more spiritual than others, judging those who still cling to worldly goods,
Ah, the spiritual ego trap. Yeah, I've heard of that.
Exactly. It's a subtle but powerful trap. Tully explains, the content of the ego may change. The mind structure that keeps it alive does not. And this structure, it has this deep, almost unconscious hold. It carries the momentum of thousands of years of collective human unconsciousness behind it. But, and this is the hopeful part, every time it is recognized, it is weakened. So there's this persistent, habitual nature to the ego, but it also offers this consistent, ongoing path to gradually dismantle its power through diligent, consistent awareness, recognizing it again and again.
Okay, so this idea of the ego always seeking identification, always needing something to cling to for its sense of self. How does that fundamental need connect to maybe a deeper sense of separation or perceived lack within us? It feels like that could be the root of so much of our striving and, well, our discomfort.
The whole Course in Miracles offers some profound insight right here. It draws a critical distinction that speaks directly to this sense of separation. It states that perception, which is inherently judgmental, was introduced only after the separation,
Yeah.
which implies that our default mode, perceiving the world through judgment, is actually a consequence of an original split, not our natural state.
Perception itself arising after separation. Interesting.
Right. And the text goes further, distinguishing between create and make. When we make something, it explains, we do it out of a specific sense of lack or need. So anything made for that kind of purpose has no true generalizability because it's just designed to fill a specific perceived void. Essentially, when you make something to fill a perceived lack, you are tacitly implying that you believe in separation.
You're acting from that belief in separation.
Exactly. The ego, the text suggests, has invented many ingenious thought systems for this purpose, but none of them are truly creative in the divine sense. Such inventiveness is ultimately described as wasted effort compared to the abstract creativity of God's creations, which, in this view, spring from a place of inherent wholeness, abundance, unity, not from deficiency or a belief in being separate.
That's a truly profound distinction, isn't it? Creating from wholeness versus making from deficiency. It seems like a fundamental split in how we approach our lives, our inner experience. One way feels expansive, unifying. The other, well, by its nature, restrictive and divisive.
And Siddhartha's spiritual journey, as depicted in Hermann Hesse's novel, beautifully illustrates this quest. This journey beyond those superficial, ego-driven identities to find an innermost truth. His path is this active stripping away of everything he thought he was. He reaches a point, after years of asceticism and philosophical study, where he realizes his true self was Atman, in its essence bearing the same eternal characteristics as Brahman. So, for our listeners, Atman is like the individual soul or self, and Brahman is the ultimate reality, the absolute all-pervading spirit.
So he saw they were fundamentally the same.
Right. He recognized this inherent identity between the two. But, and this is key, he couldn't find this true self when he had wanted to capture it in the net of thought. Through deep introspection, meditation, he recognized that the body definitely not being the self, and not the spectacle of the senses. So it also was not the thought, not the rational mind, not the learned wisdom. He's systematically stripping away all these layers, physical, emotional, intellectual, that we typically identify with.
So it's not about denying thoughts or senses or even intellect, but looking beyond them. Recognizing they aren't the ultimate I, not the fundamental essence. It's about finding something more fundamental, something that permeates all these layers.
Precisely. Siddhartha concluded that both the thoughts as well as the senses were pretty things, nice things, useful things. The ultimate meaning was hidden behind both of them. Both had to be listened to, both had to be played with, both neither had to be scorned nor overestimated. From both, the secret voices of the innermost truth had to be attentively perceived.
Wow. That's a sophisticated, nuanced understanding.
It really is. It's not an outright rejection. It's a recalibration of their role. He understood that neither the random self of the senses nor the random self of thoughts and learned knowledge should become the sole focus. Instead, the task is to tune into those subtle whispers, the secret voices beneath the surface that truly reveal the innermost truth. It requires both engagement and detachment. Playing with them, listening to them, but not getting lost in them.
This journey of self-discovery, though, trying to peel back these layers to perceive that innermost truth, it sounds incredibly challenging, almost like an ongoing internal battle, especially when those old patterns, those random selves you mentioned, keep resurfacing.
Indeed, it is a persistent struggle, and the top 7 Catholic classics describes this ongoing internal struggle, even for people deeply committed to a spiritual path. It speaks of the soul feeling as if one of its enemies were within it, and although this enemy is, as it were, hushed and asleep, it fears that he will come to life again and attack it.
That's vivid imagery. Like something lurking within.
Exactly. It highlights the persistent nature of unpurified tendencies, those deeper psychological habits, those egoic patterns. Even when they seem quiet, they remain a potential threat to inner peace and spiritual progress. It suggests that liberation isn't just a one-time conquest, It's continuous vigilance, a process of purification. As the autobiography of a yogi puts it so insightfully, God is simple. Everything else is complex. And this inner world, with its deeply ingrained egoic patterns, these unseen enemies potentially lurking within, it's clearly not simple to navigate. It requires consistent effort, self-awareness, and profound patience to achieve that lasting peace.
Diverse paths to inner transformation and stillness.
Okay, so if the goal is to go beyond this unobserved, ego-driven mind, connect with deeper truths, How do different traditions guide us? Sam Harris in Waking Up offers a very contemporary, secular approach to mindfulness that seems particularly relevant for, our modern, maybe sometimes skeptical listener.
Harris clarifies something important right away. Mindfulness is not a matter of thinking more clearly about experience. It is the act of experiencing more clearly. That's a crucial distinction. It's not about analyzing, it's about being with experience. He characterizes it as undistracted, accepting, and ultimately non-conceptual.
Mm.
And he pinpoints our deeply conditioned habit of being distracted by thoughts as the principal enemy to achieving this clarity.
The habit of distraction. Yeah, that feels familiar.
Doesn't it? The practice aims for awakening from the dream of discursive thought, that constant inner chatter we were just discussing, but to begin to see each arising image, idea, or bit of language vanish without a trace. He describes the process. By observing thoughts without judgment, without engagement, they just lose their power. They simply dissolve. And what remains? When these thoughts cease to captivate us, consciousness itself. Just a raw, unfiltered awareness of the present moment rather than the stories we constantly tell ourselves about it. It's about observing thoughts as these transient objects within consciousness rather than being totally swept away or defined by them.
That sounds like a remarkably powerful way to gain mental clarity and freedom. And importantly, without necessarily needing to adhere to any specific religious dogma. That makes it incredibly accessible for many people today, doesn't it? It strips away the cultural overlay to get to the core mechanism.
And while Harris offers that contemporary secular lens, it's truly remarkable how deeply these insights resonate with wisdom forged thousands of years ago. Let's look at the Dhammapada, a cornerstone of Buddhist thought. It outlines a classical path to liberation that in many ways shares this emphasis on mental clarity, though it does so through a more comprehensive ethical framework. It proclaims, of paths, the eightfold is the best. That refers to the Noble Eightfold Path.
Right, the Eightfold Path.
Which isn't just a philosophical concept, it's a practical guide, right? Understanding, right thought, right speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration, all of it. The text also states, detachment is the best of dhammas. Wow. Now, this detachment isn't about apathy or not caring. It's about freedom from clinging, from attachment to desires and outcomes that inevitably generate suffering. The Dhammapada describes various practices contributing to this liberation, emphasizing no fault-finding, no hurting, restraint in the Patimokkha. And Patimokkha, for our listeners, is basically the fundamental code of conduct for Buddhist monastics. Rules about speech, action, livelihood.
So ethical living is foundational.
Absolutely. It underscores how ethical living and self-discipline are seen as foundational steps towards mental purification and eventual liberation. Other practices include knowing the measure regarding food, solitary bed and chair, emphasizing moderation, simplicity, and application, too, of higher perception. The ultimate aim of this whole comprehensive path, ethics, mental discipline, wisdom, is Nibbana, which is declared supreme. Nibbana is the cessation of suffering, liberation from rebirth, a state of profound peace, inner freedom. Often described as enlightenment, it involves cultivating an understanding that lets you know the difference between, say, the body and the knower of the body, a distinction leading away from material bondage.
It really speaks to a truly holistic approach, doesn't it? Linking ethical conduct, discipline with intellectual and spiritual development. It's not just an internal state, but an entire way of living that supports inner peace and that journey to ultimate freedom.
Now, shifting gears a bit to Christian mysticism. The concept of the dark night, as described by St. John of the Cross, is a profound, though definitely challenging path to union with the divine. It involves a very different kind of journey through the inner landscape.
The dark night of the soul, right. Sounds daunting.
It does, but it's not what it might seem initially. This dark night isn't a period of divine abandonment or punishment. Paradoxically, it's presented as a divine light of the highest kind, which transcends all natural light. It's seen as an inflowing of God into the soul, which purges it from its ignorances and imperfections, habitual, natural, and spiritual. It's also known as infused contemplation or mystical theology. Infused because the purification is seen as initiated by God, not just achieved through human effort alone.
So God is actively doing the purging.
That's the idea. The process involves the understanding being purged and annihilated as to its natural light, brought actually into darkness, to expel and annihilate the habit which the soul has long since formed in its manner of understanding. And this darkness is described as profound and horrible and most painful, because it's felt in the deepest substance of the spirit as it ruthlessly uproots these deep patterns, attachments, false ideas about oneself and God.
That sounds incredibly intense.
It is. But this painful purgation leads to the soul being greatly refined, able to feel the rare and sublime touches of divine love. The ultimate outcome is an enkindling and a yearning of love that can manifest as a divine fire, transforming the soul's affections, giving it the simple, pure disposition to receive God's love directly.
Here's that fascinating paradox again. This idea that darkness, this painful purging, isn't an end, not a punishment, but a necessary path, maybe even a divine gift, leading to greater light and intimacy. The cloud of unknowing, another key text in Christian mysticism, just something similar, right? A radical surrender, almost a blind leap of faith.
Indeed, the cloud of unknowing advises a practice that resonates deeply with the dark night. It focuses on intentionally shedding intellectual understanding and sensory input. It speaks of such a blind stirring of love unto God for himself, and such a privy pressing upon this cloud of unknowing. The text strongly urges one to hold no measure in this work, encouraging the practitioner to never cease of this work the whiles thou livest.
Hold no measure, never cease. That's intense dedication.
It implies a relentless, dedicated, often non-conceptual engagement with the divine. It's about letting go of all those intellectual and sensory attachments that might otherwise obscure a direct experience of God. It's described as a work of pure love and intent, cutting through all other distractions, mental constructs, moving beyond the mind's grasp to a direct, experiential knowing.
Moving beyond Western mysticism, other Eastern Christian mystical traditions, like those in the Philokalia, also focus intensely on purifying the mind and soul, but maybe with a slightly different emphasis. I heard something about cultivating an internal chamber.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. These texts advocate not only putting bodily passions to death, controlling physical desires, but also destroying the soul's impassioned thoughts to keep the path of virtue undefiled. The reward for this dispassion, this state of freedom from disruptive passions and attachments, is the advent of God revealed to us. It speaks of finding a solitary place and striving to enter the innermost guarded secret chamber of yourself, the watchtower, which is the dwelling place of Christ, and where there's always peace, joy, and stillness.
The watchtower within. I like that image.
It's powerful. Yeah. And this inner chamber is said to be illumined by Christ, the sun that shines on the intellect, bestowing these gifts, peace, joy, stillness, as a reward for faith and a love of all that is good. The practice involves constant prayer, remembrance of God, focusing the mind on God, which can cause the light of divine contemplation to envelop a man's entire soul like a radiant cloud. It's this incredible image of internal spiritual illumination. The practice also involves active self-control, straightening the crooked paths of the passions, patiently enduring afflictions to become pure in heart, and thus eventually behold God.
That is an incredibly vivid image, that radiant cloud of divine contemplation, quite different from the painful darkness of St. John of the Cross, maybe, though both seem to lead towards a similar endpoint, direct divine connection and profound peace.
Now, turning to another ancient Indian text, the Bhagavad Gita. It outlines a path of devotion and focused meditation that feels perhaps more personal and relational compared to some of these others. Some contemplative practices emphasize abstract principles or maybe direct experience of emptiness. The Gita focuses on a supreme person. It describes those who attain liberation as individuals whose intelligence is always in the Supreme, whose minds are always in the Supreme, whose faith is only meant for the Supreme, who have completely taken shelter of him.
Total focus and surrender to the Supreme.
Exactly. The Gita instructs one to meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, emphasizing that he is not impersonal or void. It says one cannot meditate on something impersonal or void. That is very difficult. It clarifies that this supreme being, referred to as Kona, is always a person, the oldest, the controller. Ultimately, it states that to fully surrender unto Kuna in devotional service, in full kanta, consciousness is the most confidential instruction, presented as the highest perfection. The text also stresses the importance of a spiritual master to teach one to distinguish matter from spirit, which then serves as a stepping stone for further spiritual realization. This is Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion.
This definitely seems to offer a more personal, relational path to the divine, focusing on a personal God rather than an abstract principle or a non-conceptual void. The Upanishads, another foundational text from ancient India, also speak of profound knowing through connection, right, and ultimate unity.
Yes, the Upanishads claim that the one who knows the shadowless, bodiless, bloodless, pure, imperishable, attains the supreme imperishable. Knowing all, he becomes all. This speaks to that profound experience of realizing the oneness of the individual consciousness, Atman, with ultimate reality, Brahman, where the boundaries of self just dissolve into universal consciousness. And this bhakti-loving devotion is explicitly highlighted as a way of spiritual practice that can lead to this ultimate knowing and becoming. It's a path of active, loving engagement, not just purely intellectual or ascetic striving. From a practical standpoint, the Bhagavad Gita also warns against what it calls falgu renunciation, that's like superficial or incomplete. It says those without knowledge of consciousness artificially try to avoid material objects. In contrast, a conscious person knows how to use everything in the service of the Lord, turning all aspects of daily life into spiritual practice. This avoids the pitfall of merely suppressing desires, integrating devotion into action, rather than requiring a complete withdrawal from the world.
Okay, finally, let's explore the Taoist approach to inner peace. This often feels like a striking contrast to striving or intense purgation. It emphasizes harmony with a natural flow rather than forceful effort. The Tao Te Ching speaks of the way and its power.
The Tao Te Ching articulates this profound principle. Tao does not act yet. It is the root of all action. Tao does not move yet. It is the source of all creation. Tao is described as this underlying, unmanifest principle of the universe, from which everything arises, well, spontaneously. The teaching suggests living in harmony with it by submitting to the path of least resistance, like water flowing in a stream. Struggling against this inherent movement, the text teaches, is basically a useless endeavor. It only creates friction and suffering.
The path of least resistance, like water.
Exactly. And crucially for inner transformation, the nameless simplicity frees the heart of desire and reveals its inner silence. The nameless simplicity refers to that natural, unadorned state of things before we slap intellectual labels and desires onto everything. When this simplicity is embraced, the heart is freed from grasping, leading to profound inner silence. And when there is silence, one finds peace, ultimately leading to finding the anchor of the universe within himself. It's about aligning with the fundamental rhythms and order of existence, not imposing our personal will, but allowing things to unfold naturally.
That's a beautiful image, isn't it? Effortless alignment. It sounds like what the Tao of Pu hints at so well when it says something like, things just happen in the right way at the right time when you work with circumstances instead of saying, this isn't supposed to be happening this way and trying hard to make it happen some other way. It's about letting go of resistance, letting go of that need to control.
Exactly. The Tao of Pu gives these simple, relatable stories that exemplify this practical application. It suggests that when you are in tune with the way things work, then they work the way they need to, often leading to outcomes far better than if you tried to force them. It underscores the idea that often our own egoic efforts to control or manipulate outcomes are what create the very mess and inner turmoil we're trying to avoid, whereas a deeper surrender to a natural flow brings unexpected harmony, efficiency, and, yes, profound peace. It's a profound trust in the inherent wisdom of the universe, and maybe of our own deepest nature too.
Cultivating inner strength and right action.
Okay, so beyond these grand philosophical or mystical systems, what about practical daily ways to cultivate inner strength and clarity? How do we bring these big ideas into our everyday, often chaotic lives? Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way introduces something called morning pages.
Ah yes, morning pages. They're presented as a permanent spiritual practice that can apparently dramatically alter consciousness. They are basically 3 pages of longhand, stream of consciousness writing, done first thing in the morning. The rules are simple. Don't censor yourself, don't reread, just write whatever comes to mind, get it out. They serve as this uncensored tool for recording issues and conflicts, and often lead to surprising insights and breakthroughs. For instance, Cameron shares a story of a lawyer who used them to get out of my miserable job and into my real vocation. Yeah. And another of a writer who lost nearly 50 pounds because the pages told me what was eating me and they told me what I was eating.
Wow, direct feedback from the subconscious almost.
Kind of. The core idea behind the practice is this simple yet powerful directive. Trust God. Trust yourself. Cameron emphasizes that even if your pages feel whiny and trite, they are still working for you by getting those cluttered thoughts, anxieties, frustrations out of your head and onto the page. They provide a sort of weekly self-scan of your moods rather than focusing only on measurable progress, fostering deeper self-awareness, allowing the unconscious to speak. It's a way to clear the mental clutter, like sweeping a room before you can really see what's in it.
So it's like an active self-dialogue, a daily mental detox that yields tangible results, not just mental clarity, but often real-world changes and breakthroughs.
Yeah.
And she also suggests artist dates, right? Another practical tool for nurturing the self.
Yes, Artist dates are equally important in her system. They involve taking your artist for a walk, just the two of you. This means consciously dedicating, say, at least an hour a week to nurture your inner creative child, engaging in activities purely for pleasure, inspiration, exploration, with no expectation of productivity at all. Cameron notes that even a brisk 20-minute walk can dramatically alter consciousness, illustrating how even small acts of conscious self-care, playful exploration, reconnecting with that childlike wonder can be profoundly transformative. It's about prioritizing and nurturing one's creative spirit, recognizing its vital role in overall well-being, mental clarity, even spiritual growth. It's a conscious refueling.
Now, for those facing profound suffering, maybe times when these internal practices feel overwhelming or just impossible, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning offers an incredibly powerful framework for finding purpose and resilience, drawing from his own, well, harrowing experience.
Frankl's work is truly remarkable. Drawing from his experiences in concentration camps, he emphasized that hope and positive energy can transform challenges into victories. He speaks of the unique opportunity that exists even in the most dire circumstances, an opportunity found in the way one bears the burden. His core message is profound. While we cannot always control what happens to us, we always have the freedom to choose our response. It's not about avoiding suffering, but about finding meaning within it, perceiving a purpose in our endurance.
Choosing our response, even the worst situations.
Exactly. And he also developed paradoxical intention, a therapeutic technique particularly effective for things like phobias and OCD. A patient is encouraged to wish for the very thing he fears. For instance, someone with insomnia might be instructed to actively try to stay awake as long as possible rather than desperately trying to fall asleep. This counterintuitive approach often breaks the cycle of anticipatory anxiety. It helps individuals reclaim agency over their reactions. It demonstrates how a radical shift in perspective can sometimes dissolve the very problem.
That's a truly radical shift, isn't it? Finding power not in the absence of adversity, but in our chosen response to it. Transforming challenges into victories from within, rather than being defined by the suffering.
And this concept of internal agency, taking ownership for one's inner experience, is powerfully echoed in Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck. He discusses taking responsibility for my own emotions. The author reflects on a past relationship breakdown. Initially, he blamed his ex-girlfriend, but through deep introspection, he realized I hadn't been a great boyfriend, and that people don't just magically cheat on somebody they've been with unless they are unhappy for some reason.
Owning his part in it.
Right. This internal shift from external blame to profound self-reflection led him to choosing better values. Values aimed at taking care of myself, learning to feel better about myself, rather than aimed at getting her to fix what she'd broken. It's a move away from seeking external validation, away from reactive emotional states, towards internal self-sufficiency, accountability, and proactive self-improvement based on consciously chosen values.
So shifting from external blame to internal accountability seems like a key step. Often uncomfortable, maybe, but ultimately empowering. Towards a healthier, more resilient mindset, recognizing that our reactions, our choices, even to external events, are ultimately ours to control.
And Deepak Chopra's The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success introduces the law of detachment, which ties directly into this principle of releasing control. It states that in order to acquire anything in the physical universe, you have to relinquish your attachment to it. Now, that's a profound paradox.
It really is. Relinquish attachment to acquire something. How does that work without becoming totally passive? You still have the intention, the desire.
Right, exactly. It doesn't mean giving up the intention to create your desire, or even the desire itself. But it crucially means releasing your attachment to the result, letting go of the outcome. Chopra explains that detachment is based on the unquestioning belief in the power of your true self, recognizing that the universe, or your deeper self, will ultimately provide in the most beneficial way, often in forms we couldn't have imagined. In contrast, attachment stems from fear and insecurity, that desperate need for security and control that arises from not knowing one's true, abundant self.
So attachment comes from fear, detachment from trust in the self.
Precisely. Chopra warns that chasing symbols is like settling for the map instead of the territory, meaning pursuing external markers of success, wealth, status, whatever, without tapping into the inner source. This, he says, creates anxiety, a constant feeling of striving, and ultimately leaves one feeling hollow and empty inside. Because, as he puts it, you exchange yourself for the symbols of yourself. You lose touch with your intrinsic worth in the pursuit of external validation.
So what does this all mean for us, the listener, in practical terms? It seems to point towards finding true abundance, true fulfillment, not in what we get, but within ourselves.
Precisely. Chopra concludes, the source of wealth, of abundance, or of anything in the physical world is the self. This reinforces the idea that true security, fulfillment, lasting peace, they aren't found primarily in what we acquire or achieve in the external world. They're found in our connection to our deepest, most authentic being, our true self. It's about shifting to an internal locus of control and value, from external seeking to internal knowing.
Broader implications: self, society, and cosmos.
Okay, so these individual journeys of the mind are quests for clarity and purpose. They don't happen in a vacuum, do they? How do these inner transformations connect us to the larger world, to society, even to the vastness of the cosmos? The integral vision talks about something called growth hierarchies.
Yes, growth hierarchies. They're described as nested hierarchies, which means each higher level transcends and includes its predecessors. It's important to grasp this isn't a rigid, oppressive hierarchy, it's organic, evolving. This concept suggests a profound interconnectedness and an expansion of consciousness, moving from, say, egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric to cosmocentric, and what's vital is that higher levels don't oppress lower levels, they embrace them. They literally include and envelop them, offering a wider lens of perception and care. Each successive level represents an increase in the capacity for care, consciousness, cognition, and morals. So as our individual consciousness expands beyond just me, it naturally encompasses and cares for broader aspects of existence, our tribe, then all humanity, maybe eventually the entire cosmos. It's a continuous unfolding of awareness and compassion.
And Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth seems to allude to this grand tapestry of existence too, where our individual stories, our personal myths are always part of something much, much larger.
Absolutely. Campbell speaks of an ultimate mystery of all being, a foundational reality. He introduces Brahman as a neuter noun, neither male nor female, representing this ultimate mystery, the unmanifest ground of all existence. He also highlights Maya Shakti Devi, the goddess giver of life and mother of forms. Maya being the illusory or phenomenal world, and Shakti, the divine feminine energy, the creative power manifesting this world. In one Upanishad Campbell references, she instructs the gods, revealing to them the mystery of the ground of their own being. She tells them essentially, that ultimate mystery, that's where you boys yourselves got your powers. And it can turn your powers off or on, as it wills.
Wow, a reminder of where power ultimately comes from.
Exactly. It emphasizes that our individual and collective powers, our very existence, stem from and are ultimately subject to this larger fundamental cosmic force. It implies this deep dependency and interconnectedness that transcends our individual egoic pursuits, reminding us of our place in a vast energetic universe.
This interconnectedness, it naturally extends from the cosmic right down to our collective human experience, our societal structures. James Baldwin in The Fire Next Time offers a searing perspective on how individual transformation is inextricably linked to societal justice.
Baldwin argues powerfully that transformation contains the hope of liberation. It also imposes a necessity for great change. He connects the liberation of the white people directly to the total liberation of black people, asserting that the American future is precisely as bright or as dark as his. He critiques the moral contradictions and the spiritual aridity he saw in American civilization, rejecting external fixes like the American psychiatrist in favor of genuine inner and societal change. For Baldwin, the idea that a black man should want to integrate into what he called a burning house of American civilization, a house filled with hypocrisy and injustice, was a terrifying question.
A burning house, powerful metaphor.
Isn't it? He argued for a deeper transformation, one that would allow America to accept ourselves as we are and bring new life to the Western achievements and transform them. The price of this transformation, he stated, was the unconditional freedom of the Negro. He saw that his own experience of community and spiritual power, for instance in the church, a place of shared pain and joy, offered real, tangible sustenance. It contrasted sharply with the spiritual aridity he perceived in the wider, unjust society. His personal inner strength was forged in direct response to and resistance against societal injustice.
That's such a powerful connection, individual spiritual health being inseparable from collective liberation and societal justice. It's an idea that our inner landscape, our values, our sense of self profoundly impact the collective. Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass provides a really resonant ecological parallel to Baldwin's societal critique, doesn't it? Linking human consciousness and values directly to our impact on the planet.
It really does. Kimmerer discusses ecological economists who argue for reforms that would ground economics in ecological principles, and also in the constraints of thermodynamics, the fundamental laws governing energy and matter. She urges us to embrace the radical notion that we must sustain natural capital and ecosystem services if we are to maintain quality of life. Natural capital being the world's stocks of natural assets, forests, water, soil, and ecosystem services being the benefits we get from them, like clean air and water.
Things we often take for granted.
Exactly. She warns that perpetual growth is simply not compatible with natural law, and she critiques the neoclassical fallacy that human consumption has no consequences, calling it Wendigo thinking. Now, for listeners, Wendigo is a mythical creature from Algonquin folklore, a ravenous, cannibalistic giant associated with insatiable greed and destruction, particularly against nature and other humans. Using this term highlights how our collective mental patterns and values, especially those driven by unsustainable consumption and a lack of reciprocal respect for nature, directly impact the planet's health. Our internal state of being, our ethics, directly influences the external world in a profound, tangible way.
And this reminds me of the complexities of identity and conflict, too, like what's described about the Sikh Khalistan movement in 12 major world religions. While Sikhism itself is described as one of the world's most inclusive, egalitarian religions welcoming people of any faith, little discrimination based on gender, class, race. Nationalist movements, even those with a saint-soldier emphasis focused on defending the faith and justice, can tragically turn to militancy when tied to a traditional homeland and a threatened identity.
Yes. That example from 12 major world religions clearly shows how deep-seated identities and attachments to homelands, to group identity, even within an inherently inclusive spiritual framework like Sikhism, when perceived as threatened or unjustly treated, can manifest in powerful and sometimes violent ways. The source describes the Khalistan movement as a liberation campaign that, tragically, often turned to militancy and terrorist tactics. It mentions specific events like the assassination of Indira Gandhi and the bombing of Air India Flight 182. And while Sikh nationalism has reportedly lost much support since then, the existence of pro-Khalistan movements today highlights that enduring tension between identity, territory, the saint-soldier emphasis, and how these powerful collective psychological forces can be co-opted. It really underscores the crucial need for both internal peace and the external peaceful resolution of conflicts, because the collective mind's grip on identity can have devastating real-world consequences. And just to be clear, we're reporting on the dynamics presented in the source material here, not endorsing any viewpoint, but observing how strong group identity can manifest.
Right. An important distinction. Now, to gain this broader perspective, sometimes we need a stark reminder of our own impermanence, don't we? To put our earthly concerns into a cosmic context. Caspar Tikula's The Power of Ritual discusses that ancient practice of memento mori.
Yes, memento mori. Remember, you must die. It's a practice found in such diverse cultures. Classical antiquity Roman generals supposedly had someone whisper it during their triumphs. Tibetan Buddhism, Japanese samurai culture. It's a simple yet profound reminder that we too shall die. It serves as a kind of camera lens that zooms out, helping us see our lives with greater perspective on what truly matters. The problems we often obsess over, those day-to-day anxieties, don't disappear, Tikula explains, but they do fade into a broader background when we contemplate the brevity of life and when we raise our longings to the eternal. It's not about being morbid, but about getting clarity on life's priorities, fostering a deeper appreciation for the present by recognizing the transient nature of, well, everything earthly.
And the Quran also speaks to this vast cosmic perspective, doesn't it? Describing mountains that flit by like clouds God's devising. And a day shall come when the trumpet shall be blown, and all who are in the heavens and earth shall be filled with fright. These incredibly vivid, dynamic images, they emphasize not only the temporary nature of our current existence, but also our small yet significant place in this grand, awe-inspiring, ultimately divine order. It feels like a powerful invitation to consider what is truly eternal and to live with that ultimate perspective in mind. Outro. Wow. We've journeyed through a truly remarkable landscape of thought today, haven't we? From those subtle whispers of the ego shaping our individual experience, right up to the expansive reaches of cosmic consciousness connecting us to everything. We've explored how ancient traditions and modern insights alike offer this profound guidance for navigating the labyrinth of the mind, urging us toward greater awareness, stillness, and ultimately more responsible and purposeful action in the world.
Absolutely. The common thread running through these incredibly diverse sources seems to be this recognition of our immense potential. Potential for inner clarity, for truly purposeful living. Whether it's through the secular mindfulness of Sam Harris, the rigorous ethical and meditative path of the Dhammapada, the profound mystical contemplation of St. John of the Cross, or the devotional surrender of the Bhagavad Gita, or even the effortless alignment of the Tao, the human spirit persistently seeks to understand and align with something greater than itself. These paths, they're varied in their approach, sure, but they all point towards a liberation from that unobserved mind, that conditioned mind pattern of the ego, offering a way to experience life with greater presence, meaning, and a deeper connection to reality.
So after this whole journey through myriad wisdom traditions, what does this all mean for you, our listener, right now in your own life?
Well, consider this thought. Perhaps the most profound transformation isn't necessarily about finding one single answer or rigidly adhering to just one dogma, but rather, maybe it's about cultivating the awareness to discern those secret voices of the innermost truth, as Siddhartha learned, within the rich symphony of diverse wisdom that's available to us. It's about letting this nuanced understanding gradually free you from that powerful momentum of thousands of years of collective human unconsciousness, as Eckhart Tolle puts it, allowing you to slowly shed those limiting identifications and, ultimately, to live a life of deeper presence, profound purpose, and maybe a more expansive connection to everything.